I have read 11 more fantasy or sci-fi books, and as we usually do on this channel, it's time to rank them from worst to best. Now, on 11th spot is a book that I feel kind of bad for putting at the very bottom, because I just personally think that this book was probably written for a different audience than mine. But for the Viking book club in December, we read The Light in Death by Dennis Schramer, who is actually also a page of mine. So you're watching this, Dennis, this is nothing personal, I just think your book wasn't written for me. But yeah, this kind of felt like a absurdist middle grade fantasy with some adult themes as well. It was just absolutely chaotic, incredibly fast paced, and it was just a wild time. So if you enjoy books that are just quite chaotic, quite fun, I mean there's a lot of humor in that book, which again is also an element that usually doesn't work for me, then I would recommend this book. I just personally think that this is not a book I would have picked up if it wasn't for the book club, and I didn't really expect to love it, and I just think I wasn't the right person to read it. Now on 10th spot, which it was a massive disappointment, is Children of Ruin by Adam Jakowski, the second book in the Children of Time trilogy. Children of Time is one of my all-time favorite books, I mean ever. I loved that book. Then I was eager to pick up book 2, and unfortunately I don't think I connected to a single page in this book. It just felt literally like reading a science book. Now I know that Jakowski, he is known for writing hard sci-fi, but with Children of Time, the first book, I just felt like there's so many emotional moments, great characters, but here I just didn't connect with the story, and the second half was a real slog. I just needed to get to it as fast as possible, and not because I wanted to like really get to the end because I was excited. I wanted to get to the end because I was just bored. So this is one of the biggest disappointments of the year for sure. Okay, on 9th spot, and I do have a physical copy, I don't know where it is at the moment, but that is City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. Now, this was not a badly written book by any means. I mean, I thought it was actually quite well written, and it also made me appreciate why people love this book. But for me, there was just a couple of things that held it back from being a novel that I loved, and also held me back from wanting to continue the series. Firstly, there's some romance in this novel. Like, it's not like excessive like Fourth Wing, but there's definitely romance. Romance just really usually detracts some points from me because I just don't find it exciting. The romance wasn't badly handled, it doesn't excite me. Now the world building was great, the writing style was great, but the biggest thing that kind of bothered me is that it felt like this world had so much to offer, and then we are primarily just focused on quite a small area. Like, we stay in the same city, and I just wanted this world to open up. I wanted to experience more things outside, but it was just very focused on one place. And then also I did find the politics to be a bit confusing. I mean, when the book ended, there is like a massive like plot twist. So I think that book 2 will probably like really open up the world and actually deliver what I really wanted from book 1. But I think just due to the romance elements and stuff like that, I probably won't be continuing the series. But yeah, I didn't hate it. On the 8th spot, we have The Night of the Moon by Gregory Contaxis. This is a very short fantasy novella. This is the prequel to The Return of the Knight, I think the first book in the series is called. Yeah, I had a great time with this one. It is very fast paced. I especially enjoyed the first half of this very short book. The second half I thought felt a bit rushed and maybe slightly undeserved. This novella had been like 30 pages more, then I wouldn't have that slight issue, but nonetheless you can read this in one setting. It is that short, and it's a beautiful cover, and it's a great entry point into the series, which I believe Contaxis, he is planning on writing 4 more books in the main series. So yeah, there'll be lots of pages for you to get stuck into eventually. So yeah, I would recommend this, albeit it wasn't like anything that blew me away. Next up we have another novella, Ruins of Smoke by Joe Silva. This is a prequel novella to Seas of War. Feels like in the self-published community, writing prequel novellas and often handing them out for free is definitely a trend. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one. If you have read The Fall by Ryan Cahill, then I think you will see lots of similarities. Like, similar to The Fall, we're dropped into this massive conflict. Things are just hitting the roof, and it is chaotic, it is fast-paced, and it is just massive in scale. Now, The Fall is probably just like slightly better in my opinion, but this was still a really good time, and if you're interested in this series, then this is definitely worth checking out. Next up we have Ascension by Nicholas Binge. Now, I have read Recursion and Dark Matter this year by Blake Crouch, and a lot of people said that this one feels similar to Blake Crouch. And Blake Crouch, he has become my new daddy, my new obsession. And this is the Broken Binding edition, and it's quite short. I was like, I need to check this out. This might be a real hidden gem. Had seen some good reviews on Twitter. And I must say, for the first 60% of this novel, it felt and delivered in every way I wanted it to. And I could definitely see there were so many comparisons to Blake Crouch, and in a lot of ways the writing was just as good. But I just think that since the plot here is so insane, and Nicholas Binge, he really also has to use some almost unbelievable methods to actually explain why there suddenly is a massive mountain that has appeared out of nowhere. I did enjoy it. I just felt like the second half, or especially the last third, the author kind of lost me there. I just became a bit too confused, and it just became a bit too crazy, basically, in my opinion. But the last chapter here was also, it was really, really good. So I have kind of mixed feelings about this one, because I loved the first 60%, then I didn't really enjoy the last third, except the very last chapter. If you're a massive fan of sci-fi thrillers, I still think that this is worth checking out, albeit I don't think it's as good or anywhere near as good as Dark Matter or Recursion, but still worth checking out. And then we have The Troop by Nick Cutter. Now, I read this for the spooky season, and this is my first novel I read by Nick Cutter, and yeah, I enjoyed it. I mean, he's no Stephen King, and the gore elements are definitely like quite at the forefront when you are reading a Nick Cutter novel, I've heard, and that's very, very true for The Troop. We're basically set on this tiny island where this leader with like some younger teenagers are going on a camping trip, and then this guy, he appears from nowhere and he just can't stop eating. He is absolutely out of his mind, and then we discover that there is something really horrifying happening to this person's body. So this group is being quarantined on this small island, and then yeah, just chaos pursues, and it is horrifying. The ending was insane. I mean, I did enjoy it. I didn't feel as attached to the characters as maybe in a typical Stephen King novel, but nonetheless, it's a relatively short novel. It's around 300 pages. It definitely is spooky, and it definitely has lots of gore. So if you're into those things, then I think you should definitely check out The Troop. The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon by Stephen King. I also have a physical copy, I can't find it. But yeah, this is a very short Stephen King novel, and also one that is often like talked about as being quite underrated. And yeah, I was in the spooky like mood, so I picked this one up. I think it's only around 150 pages. So yeah, you can read it very, very quickly. It might be 200 pages, but yeah, it's basically about this young girl that goes on a camping trip with her family, and she gets lost in the wood. Now, she is 9 years old, I believe, so she's very young, and she loves this baseball player called Tom Gordon, so she starts to hallucinate, and occasionally she starts seeing him. I absolutely love this novella. It's very atmospheric. It almost felt like you were there. And I think that Stephen King, he just writes children like almost no one else. He is the master of coming of age and writing from the perspective of children. When you're reading this novel, you just can't help but feel so bad and also sad for this young girl. The very fact that we follow a young child that's lost in a wood for like almost 200 pages and is so enjoyable is quite a feat. I don't think many authors are able to write such a simple plot in such a compelling way. So I think just for the sheer brilliance of the plot structure being so basic and me still enjoying it so much, I just felt like I needed to rate it quite highly. So yeah, it's a short Stephen King novel if you want to check out his writing. It's not his best by any means, but I still had a great time. Now, my third favorite book out of the past 11 books I read is Bookshops and Bone Dust by Travis Baldree. Now, if you have read Legends and Latte, then you probably at this point have also read Bookshops and Bone Dust, which is a prequel novel set around 20 years before the events of Legends and Latte. And we basically follow Viv as she's injured, so she's stuck in this village, and she becomes involved in this local bookshop, and she falls in love with reading. So I think the premise is absolutely brilliant. And just as with Legends and Latte, we've come to expect like really cozy characters, lots of cozy moments, lots of like lessons for life, and all of those things are in this book, and I absolutely loved it. And one thing that I actually really appreciated, which I was a bit surprised by, is that the plot is much more complex in this one. Like, there is a proper like mystery kind of plot, as well as Viv like opening or like working on this bookshop. Now, I do still think that Legends of Latte is slightly better. It might just be since it was the first like cozy fantasy I had ever read. But yeah, Bookshops and Bone Dust is still a brilliant, brilliant novel. And yeah, if you enjoyed Legends of Latte, then I can't recommend this one enough. The second best book out of the past 11 I read is Empire of Dirt by Philip C. Quantrill. Now, I have many times in the past described the series as if you enjoy John Gwynne or Ryan Cahill, then you need to pick up the Echo Saga, and I still stand by that. This is classic fantasy, but it feels more modern since the pacing is fast. The characters are maybe have a bit more like emotional depth to them, if that makes any sense. And yeah, the plot is just absolutely crazy big. And what I love about these is that while these are epic in scale, you can see here, they're not like 1,000 page each like Robert Jordan. These are like 400 or 500 pages, so you can read them relatively fast. I mean, 500 pages is still a lot. There are 9 books in the primary series. It's split into 3 trilogies, and then Philip C. Crenshaw, he's recently released a prequel novel that is set in like 3,000 years in the past or something. So yeah, there are 10 books for you to get stuck in if you enjoy classic fantasy that feels modern. Now, Rise of the Ranger, which is the first book, was a solid entry, but this book is just, it was a massive improvement in my opinion, and I really enjoyed this one. So yeah, highly would recommend. Now, my favorite book I read out of the past 11 is The Trials of Empire by Richard Swan, the third and final book in the Empire of the Wolf series. Now, I will make a full video, or I might already have made one, but yeah, this series has become one of my new favorites for sure. The third book is straight up almost horror. It's like medieval fantastical horror. It is so dark, and I was very surprised by how dark it becomes. The darkness doesn't necessarily come from like human beings, but it comes from the fantastical elements. It's proper terrifying. If you want to read something that has like really good politics, really good dialogue, like I'm blown away by that, and also the characters are brilliant, but then it slowly becomes more and more horror, then pick up the series. It is a masterpiece in my opinion, and also it feels different. It's not something I've ever read in the fantasy genre. A medieval fantasy / political thriller kinda. It is just so different, but that is what I love. I love discovering new books that feel like nothing you ever read before. I mean, there are some things that are familiar, but there's a lot of things here that also feels so refreshing and new. So yeah, can't recommend Empire of the Wolf enough. So those are the past 11 books I read, ranked from worst to best. Have you read any of these? Definitely let me know. And what are some of the best books you have read in recent times? Definitely let me know in the comments down below. And thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for watching to the end of this video. Now, if you want to support what I do here, then I do have a Patreon. Now, a reason why I created a Patreon was to find a new way to reinvest to the channel, because basically since I created my Patreon, I spent around 100% of my earnings to hire an editor to do a couple of videos for me a month. Now, since creating my Patreon, an editor has done more than 20 videos for me on my channel, so it makes a huge difference. Now, if you join my Patreon, you will also get some benefits. For example, you'll get a name in my videos like these guys. You'll also be able to join the exclusive Viking book club where every month we read one book together, and you might be the one to put the book forward. This month we're reading this book, and next month we're reading this book. You also get to vote on my next read, get access to exclusive videos like a wrap-up or even book reviews, and so much more. But this is totally voluntary, but all support is much appreciated.